December 1805. Napoleon Bonaparte is outnumbered, exhausted, and surrounded. Deep inside enemy territory with no clear way out. Two emperors, one Russian, one Austrian. Their massive combined army holds every strategic advantage on the field. They hold the high ground, looking down at a French army that appears weakened, stretched thin, and struggling to hold its position. They are completely convinced. This is the moment Napoleon finally loses. The moment the legend finally ends. They are wrong. Completely wrong. Because every single thing they see, every signal, every sign, is a deliberate lie. This is Austerlitz, often considered one of the greatest military deceptions ever executed in the history of warfare. Not a battle of strength, a battle of illusion, psychology, and calculated deception, executed at every single level. Napoleon did not defeat them with strength. He defeated them with their own decisions. Step by step, move by move. To understand the genius, you need to see the board. Before the first piece even moves, Europe had united against France. The third coalition, Russia and Austria, was marching to end Napoleon forever. Napoleon was deep inside enemy territory. Supply lines stretched dangerously thin. Every rational calculation pointed toward immediate retreat. But Napoleon was not retreating. He was building one of the most ambitious psychological deceptions of his entire career. Weeks before the battle, he began feeding Allied commanders exactly what they wanted to believe about him. He ordered his troops to abandon perfectly defensible positions, voluntarily, visibly, in full view of enemy scouts. He sent a personal message to Tsar Alexander that appeared almost desperate, exactly as he intended. To the young Tsar, the message was unmistakable. Napoleon is finished. He is afraid. He is ready to break. The veteran Russian general Kutuzov read the situation differently. He sensed something dangerous beneath this sudden French weakness. Kutuzov urged caution. This retreat is suspicious, he warned the Tsar. We should not advance recklessly into this. Several senior Russian officers shared his concerns, but their warnings carried almost no weight against the Tsar's momentum. Confidence can blind even capable leaders. Kutuzov's authority was increasingly sidelined as the Tsar and his advisors pushed for an aggressive advance. The Allied army arrived at Austerlitz and immediately secured the Pratzen heights, the most dominant terrain on the entire field. In military doctrine, the high ground is everything. Whoever holds it commands the battlefield below. That was the rule. Napoleon had abandoned the Pratzen heights without firing a single shot. The Allied commanders were thrilled, almost too thrilled. Looking down from the ridge, the Tsar surveyed the French deployment and saw something that made him smile. The Allies weren't acting irrationally. Everything Napoleon had shown them pointed directly toward French weakness, collapse, and desperation. That was the true brilliance. The deception worked precisely because it looked completely, undeniably, dangerously believable from every angle. Napoleon's right flank was almost completely exposed, dangerously thin, practically inviting an overwhelming Allied attack. To the Allied commanders, it looked like a massive blunder, a catastrophic mistake by an exhausted, desperate general. It was not a mistake. It was the bait, precisely placed, deliberately obvious, psychologically irresistible to any aggressive commander. Napoleon knew exactly what hungry eyes see when they spot a weakness, an open door to total, decisive victory. He needed them to attack the right flank. To do that, they would have to empty the Pratzen heights themselves. But one problem remained. What if the Allies refused to take the bait? What if caution overruled ambition? Everything now depended on a single decision the Tsar had not yet made. One choice that would seal his fate. Hidden from Allied scouts, Marshal Davout's elite corps was already force-marching from Vienna straight toward Austerlitz. Roughly 70 miles in less than 2 days. An extraordinary forced march through freezing roads and brutal winter terrain. Davout's men arrived exhausted, but invisible, tucked behind ridgelines, completely hidden from Allied reconnaissance and enemy eyes. They were the anvil. When the Allied left wing smashed into what they thought was weakness, Davout would hold. The trap was now fully armed. Every player was in position. All Napoleon needed now was patience and the right mistake. The night of December 1st fell over Moravia. Bitter cold, complete silence. Napoleon barely slept, walking the lines alone. He moved quietly among his troops, listening. They lit small fires against the freezing darkness. They recognized their emperor. Spontaneously, soldiers twisted straw into makeshift torches, lighting up the entire French camp from deep within.
Across the battlefield, Allied commanders saw thousands of flickering lights suddenly spreading through the French lines below. They assumed chaos. Disorganized troops scrambling in fear. They saw what they wanted to see, exactly as Napoleon intended. Dawn broke on December 2nd, 1805. A thick morning fog rolled across the battlefield, thick enough to swallow entire armies. The Tsar gave the order. Massive columns of Russian and Austrian infantry began pouring confidently down from the Pratzen heights, tens of thousands of boots crunching through the frozen ground, descending toward the French right flank with absolute certainty. They were overwhelming. They were certain. They were walking, step by confident step, directly into the mouth of the trap. As the Allied left wing drove downhill, a catastrophic gap tore open in the very center of their battle line. The Pratzen heights, the commanding high ground they had celebrated just hours before, were now nearly completely empty. Napoleon watched from his command post on a small hill, eyes fixed on the gap forming in their center. He turned to Marshal Soult, whose corps was hidden in the valley fog directly below the heights. One question: how long to reach the top? Napoleon asked. Soult replied without hesitation, 20 minutes, sire. 20 minutes. Napoleon studied the battlefield for a long, silent moment. His answer came slow, quiet, absolute. Then we wait 15 minutes, while the enemy committed deeper, while the gap in their center became impossible, permanently impossible to close. At 9 in the morning, the fog began to lift. The legendary sun of Austerlitz broke suddenly through the clouds. For Napoleon's soldiers, it felt like destiny itself had arrived. A signal, a sign, the moment they had been waiting for. The sunlight revealed what the fog had hidden. 30,000 elite French soldiers, perfectly positioned at the foot of the heights. The Allied commanders on the ridge stared down in disbelief. The center was wide open. The French were already moving. The French drums erupted. The charge began. Marshal Soult's corps surged forward and upward, straight up the steep Pratzen slopes. In less than half an hour, the Allied center began to crack under the French assault. The French hit the depleted Russian line like a hammer. Brutal hand-to-hand combat erupted across the ridgeline. Bayonets clashed in the freezing air. Men fought for every frozen inch. The Russian center, gutted to fuel the attack below, scrambled desperately to defend ground they had no men left to hold. Within 2 hours, the Pratzen heights belonged to Napoleon. The high ground was his. The trap was fully sprung. The Allied army was now cut in half. Communication between their left and right wings completely, catastrophically severed. On the right flank, Marshal Davout's corps was doing exactly what they were positioned to do: hold the line. The massive Allied left wing crashed into Davout's thin line, expecting a quick breakthrough. Instead, they found a wall. Davout's men, vastly outnumbered, held for hours, grinding the Allied assault to a complete and costly standstill. Below, the Allied left wing finally understood. They were not breaking the French. The French had been breaking them all along. Tsar Alexander, watching his center collapse and his left wing stall, made one final desperate decision. He committed the Russian Imperial Guard, among the most elite soldiers in the Russian Empire, into the fight. The Guard charged uphill toward the Pratzen heights in a fierce counterattack to retake the critical ground at any cost. For a brief, terrifying moment, the French center actually wavered. The Russian Guard was ferocious, disciplined, and absolutely relentless. Napoleon did not panic. He watched, calculated, then committed his own heavy cavalry at the exact, precise right moment.
The French Imperial Guard cavalry, among the finest cavalry forces in Europe, slammed hard into the advancing Russian Imperial Guard. The collision was thunderous, steel against steel. Two elite forces locked in desperate, furious close-quarters combat on a frozen hill. The Russian Guard was forced back after fierce fighting. The counterattack collapsed completely. The heights remained firmly, decisively French. The center secured, Napoleon now turned his artillery around, aiming it downhill at the very men who had advanced so confidently. The massive Allied left wing, tens of thousands who had marched down so confidently, was now completely surrounded on all sides. French forces above them, French forces flanking them, Davout's corps blocking every possible retreat route behind them. Nowhere to run. French cannon fire rained down from the very heights they had abandoned just hours before. The irony was devastating and brutal. Panic ripped through the Allied ranks. Formations dissolved, officers lost control. The organized retreat collapsed into a desperate, chaotic rout. Thousands of Allied soldiers ran toward the frozen Satchan ponds, the only apparent escape route still visible to them. Napoleon ordered his cannons to aim not at the men, but at the ice beneath their feet. A brutal, calculated order. Some units fell through the shattered ice, though later accounts, many shaped by Napoleon himself, likely exaggerated the full scale. What was certain, the Allied left wing was destroyed. The trap had closed with devastating precision. By sunset, the battle was over. Alexander's army was shattered. The Third Coalition had collapsed. The immediate consequences were seismic. Austria surrendered within weeks, stripped of vast territories and much of its military influence. Within months, the Holy Roman Empire, weakened by the coalition's defeat and Napoleon's growing dominance, would be dissolved forever. Austerlitz is not just a story of genius. It is a study in how capable people make catastrophic errors, and exactly why. The Allies walked into the exact trap Napoleon had built for them. Subscribe to Epic Sagas and never miss the next one.